One kind of shark living deep in the ocean today looks almost exactly like sharks that were swimming around 80 million years ago. That is long before many familiar animals even existed. Its long, snake-like body, its strange rows of pointed teeth, its odd, frilly gills, all of it has stayed nearly the same for an incredibly long stretch of time. That is a strange thing to hear. Most animals slowly change over long periods of time. New shapes appear, old features disappear. So how can one single shark stay looking almost exactly the same for 80 million years while so much of the rest of life on Earth kept changing all around it? Most people would guess this shark must have simply stopped evolving completely, almost like it got stuck somewhere along the way while every other animal kept moving forward. That seems like the easiest explanation for something that looks this unchanged after so much time. But that guess is wrong. This shark has not stopped evolving at all. Its body is still slowly changing, generation after generation, exactly like every other living thing on Earth. Small changes in its genes are still happening all the time. The real question is not why change stopped completely. It is why none of those small changes ever grew into something big enough to actually look different from the outside. Here is the real reason. This shark lives deep down in cold, dark ocean water, in a place that has stayed remarkably stable for an extremely long time. Down there, the water temperature barely shifts. The amount of light barely shifts, since there is almost none at all to begin with. The kinds of prey available have not changed very much either. In many ways, this shark's entire neighborhood has remained roughly the same for millions and millions of years. Think about how differently a person might dress depending on where they live. Someone living somewhere with 4 very different seasons needs a whole closet full of different clothes, heavy coats for winter, light shirts for summer. But someone living somewhere the weather barely ever changes could wear nearly the same outfit every single day and still be perfectly comfortable year after year without ever needing to buy anything new. This shark's deep ocean home works a lot like that second example. Since almost nothing around it changes, its body has never really needed a new outfit either. When an environment barely changes, a body shape that already works well tends to keep working well over and over again, generation after generation. This shark's long body helps it hide and strike quickly in tight spaces. Its unusual teeth help it grab soft, slippery prey like squid. None of that has needed to change because the deep, dark world around it has not asked for anything different. This means that whenever a new, unusual body shape does appear by chance, through the normal small genetic changes every living thing experiences, it usually does not offer any real advantage. In a stable, unchanging world like this one, sticking with a shape that already works tends to beat trying out something new and different. Over enough generations, the animals that stay closest to the tried and true shape tend to survive and reproduce just as well, or even better, than the ones carrying unusual new changes. So the overall shape of the species keeps getting pulled back toward that same successful design, generation after generation, almost like a rubber band snapping back to its original shape. It helps to remember that new genetic changes are always happening in every living species all the time, whether the surrounding world is changing or not. The real difference here is not how often new changes appear. It is whether those new changes actually help an animal survive and have babies better than the old design did. In a world that keeps shifting, an unusual new change sometimes turns out to be exactly what is needed. In a world that barely shifts at all, that same unusual change usually turns out to be pointless, or even slightly harmful, and tends to quietly fade back out of the population over time. This is very different from what happens to animals living in places that keep changing quickly. Compare this shark to animals living near the surface of the ocean, where water temperatures shift with the seasons, food supplies rise and fall, and new competitors are always showing up. In a fast-changing world like that, a body shape that worked well last year might not work nearly as well this year. Animals living in these fast-changing places tend to show much bigger, much faster changes in body shape over time, simply because their environment keeps forcing new problems on them over and over again. This same basic pattern, very little visible change happening inside a very stable environment, shows up in a few other creatures too, not just this one shark. Certain hard-shelled sea creatures living along quiet, ancient coastlines have also kept a very similar body shape for an extremely long stretch of time. Largely because their environment, much like this shark's deep dark home, has also stayed fairly stable and predictable across a very long stretch of time. These animals are sometimes called living fossils, since their bodies closely resemble ancestors that lived an extremely long time ago, almost like walking, swimming reminders of what life once looked like in the distant past. But the name can be a little misleading, since these animals are not frozen relics stuck in time. They are simply very well matched to homes that have not demanded very much change from them generation after generation for millions of years in a row. Zooming out, this whole story reshapes how we should think about evolution itself. Evolution is not really a race that always pushes every living thing towards something new and different. It is closer to a constant search for whatever body plan fits best with the world an animal actually lives in. When that world barely changes, the best-fitting shape barely needs to change either. Staying the same, generation after generation, is not a sign that evolution has failed or stopped working. In a place this steady and this stable, staying the same can actually be the single smartest strategy of all. We tend to picture evolution as a straight line, always moving forward towards something newer and more advanced. But this shark is a good reminder that evolution does not actually care about newer or more advanced at all. It only cares about what survives and reproduces successfully in one particular place. Sometimes that answer changes quickly. Sometimes, in a deep, dark, endlessly stable corner of the ocean, that answer barely changes at all. So somewhere far below the surface of the ocean, in cold, dark water that has looked and felt almost exactly the same for tens of millions of years, this long, strange-looking shark drifts slowly forward, exactly the way its distant ancestors likely once did, long before most familiar animals on land had ever appeared at all. It is not stuck in the past, it simply never needed to leave a home that never really changed underneath it.